Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for stopping by. I'm really glad you're here. My name is Becca, and this channel is all about my love for spinning, weaving, knitting, sewing, all the fiber things. If you're enjoying this fiber adventure, please consider leaving a like or a comment, or subscribing to my channel, or sharing with your friends. I invite you to grab whatever it is you have on the go and join me. Let's make some stuff. Today I'd like to share with you the design of a new shawl that I'm working on. I'm ready for a big project after a couple of months of small projects during our summertime make-along. And this project has a bit of a long story of inspiration that I would like to share with you. So several years ago, I was browsing on Netflix, as one does, and I came across a program called the National Norwegian Knitting Night. And if you haven't heard of this, I highly encourage you to check it out. I was enraptured by this. This is part of the slow TV movement. And when they said knitting night, that's exactly what they meant. This was a 12-hour program. I think Netflix split it into a couple of chunks, but still, I mean, we're talking like 6 to 8 hours of program in a setting. And they had all of these people knitting. They had people spinning and shearing a sheep, spinning the wool, and making a sweater, all in the course of a night. It was just, for me, super exciting and exactly the world that I want to live in. So it's unfortunately, sadly, it's no longer on Netflix. I think it was in 2013 that they did this event, so it's been quite a while, but you can still find it on Norwegian, the Norwegian TV website, and I'll put a link down below. It may not be the original program. It's possible this is a commentary version. I found this to be the perfect thing to participate in the knitting tradition of another country. And I'm pretty sure that the Norwegian, I'm pretty sure that the Netflix version had subtitles, so that shouldn't be a problem. But you know, if you know how to knit, you'll understand what's going on. So through this experience, I then got excited about, well, are there other knitting programs available? Because I hadn't really considered that people would be making television about knitting. I don't know why I thought that would be a weird thing. But I then, upon scouring YouTube, discovered a Danish television program called Store Strikkedyst, which I'm probably mispronouncing, which is essentially a reality TV competition similar to the Great British Bake Off, if you've seen that. I typically don't like American versions of these competition shows because I really don't like competition. But I find that the British ones and now the Danish ones are much more in the spirit of camaraderie, and everybody's excited about what everybody else is making. And there isn't that part of competition that I don't like, where people are trying to sabotage one another or undercut, or feelings of jealousy. None of that exists. So this program is a multi-episodal program, and it was all in Danish. And I watched it and didn't care that I couldn't understand it at all. I thought it was wonderful to see people taking on these little knitting challenges of creating things from having the run of basically a yarn shop and letting their inspiration run to create knitted items and garments and art pieces. And It just makes me so happy that such a thing exists in the world. These episodes they had a couple of seasons of this program, and the episodes are largely available on YouTube if you search. I'll put a couple of links in the description box so you can sort of head down the rabbit hole if you'd like. I don't think that all of the episodes are available through YouTube, but certainly some of them are. And in this program, because it was a competition program, they had judges. And the judges were amazing fiber artists from Denmark, one of whom was Christel Seyfarth, who makes amazing art knit garments. And she has a little shop in Fenø, Denmark, which is a tiny island off the coast of Denmark. And through this, she has a website, which I'll put in the description box as well. She sells not only made garments, but knit kits, which have the pattern and all the yarn that you need for creating a beautiful garment. And so after watching, or maybe even during watching, I can't remember it right now, this Danish knitting program, I went off to her website and bought a pattern. And the pattern and the box of yarn arrived. It was beautiful. Lovely photography. Everything was fantastic. It was packaged really beautifully. The pattern was in Danish. And not only do I not understand spoken Danish, I don't read Danish. So it was an adventure to translate the pattern. I used Google Translate, and most of the knitting instructions made sense. It didn't translate obviously into a knitting pattern in English. I had to sort of take what I knew about knitting and decide which English instructions it should be in some cases. So it took a while to create the English version of the Danish pattern. But I managed to get through it. And this is the finished object. This beautiful shawl. It is a colorwork Fair Isle shawl. As you can see the back side. It's knit in the round from the bottom. It's a triangular shawl. And I can't lift it up and show you all of it on camera because it's enormous. But it's knit from the point up in the round. So you end up with a cone, essentially, that's then steeked across the sides. And then this border is picked up and knit and then sewn down on the other side to cover all of the steeked edges. And then these beautiful tassels get put on at the end, or created and put on at the end. I learned so many new techniques with this pattern. One was her signature method of doing color gradients. And so the pattern came with, or the kit came with, the black, several balls of the black, which is the main color, and the contrasting color is actually made up of, I think 4 or 5 different colors of or shades of the blue, and you make your own gradient ball out of them. So you decide however long you want one color to be, and then you just splice on the next color and you make your own ball out of the gradients. It's an amazing technique. Creates this beautiful random shifting color palette, which is just, I think, so cool. And what a great thing that she's done to make this technique. The other thing that I learned, or another thing that I learned, was how to knit Fair Isle with both strands of yarn in my left hand. So I knew how to do continental knitting, where you hold the yarn in the left hand, and I also knew how to do right-handed knitting, where you throw the yarn around. But my previous Fair Isle work, I had essentially done the two-hand method, where you're holding one yarn in your left hand and one yarn in your right hand, and you just sort of pick up whichever one you need at the time. Fair Isle knitting, for those of you who don't know, is where you knit with two different strands of yarn, two different colors of yarn in each row. It's always only two for it to be Fair Isle. The colors that you're using, the two colors, can shift row by row, but for Fair Isle it's only two colors or two strands of yarn that you're carrying in any particular row. And the yarn that you're not using gets carried along the back in these floats and tacked in so that it's not long loops dangling on the back of your work. So again, Fair Isle, I used to do, or had done, one in my right hand and one in my left hand, which works, but it was slow, and the balls would get all twisted up and you'd have to go and untwist them all the time. In Christel's Seyfarth's pattern, she also teaches a technique for Fair Isle that I hadn't done before, where you're holding both of the yarns in your left hand, and you actually are able to, just with a particular movement of the needle, use that to wrap the floats while you're going, and so you're not having to twist your balls of yarn as much, and it was a complete breakthrough for me. It was so much faster to knit this way, Fair Isle, than the way I was doing it. As an example, I made a Fair Isle sweater. It was a very ambitious project for me at the time. For my husband, it was a very large sweater, because he is a large man, and I think it took me at least a year and maybe two to finish that sweater. Of course, I did other things in the meantime, but it was a very tedious process, very time-consuming process, and took a lot of brain power while I was doing it. Whereas this project didn't take me nearly as long, even though it's much bigger. Just doing the Fair Isle in that way and not having to take all the time to untangle the balls of yarn really sped the process up. I know that she has a video, again, on YouTube for the techniques both of making the color gradient balls and also for doing the Fair Isle. It might be in the same video. I'll see if I can find the link for it, and I'll put that in the description below. So that was the Christel Seyfarth shawl. I was so excited about the work that she does, and they're just glorious, all of the things that she makes and designs. And so I was then inspired by this process to make a design of my own, and that's what I'd like to talk about next. In some of my previous videos, I've talked about and shared a couple of the patterns for a book that I've been working on called Knitted Kansas, which is inspired by the natural world that I am surrounded by living in Kansas. And every year in August, the monarch butterflies migrate from Canada down to Mexico, and many of them come through Kansas, and it has always been a really magical time of year. Monarch butterflies, if you aren't familiar with them, they have the longest migration of any insect. They migrate from Mexico to Canada, and then Canada to Mexico. They don't make it all in one generation, but it's just an amazing site. For many people across North America, this is one of their favorite times of year, and it's definitely one of my favorite times as well. So I knew that I wanted to make a project that was inspired by the Monarch migration, and my very good friend Charlie and I were collaborating on this project, and he came up with an amazing colorwork knit chart design for a tessellated monarchs. Especially when they get to Mexico, the monarchs are all in this one bit of forest, and they just overlap with each other. There are so many of them. And so this was the first pattern that I had considered for our Monarch project, and this is what the swatch looks like for that. I don't even know if you can see them, but here is a butterfly, and here is a butterfly, and here is a butterfly, and they're just nested together in this almost Art Deco configuration. And this chart I think is so cool. And I was originally considering making this into an all-over pattern pullover, and I might still do that. I think it would look really cool. But I thought that as I had made the Christel Seyfarth shawl, that a similar shawl with a Monarch pattern on it would be really, really awesome. But after I made this swatch, I thought this is probably not the design for that project, because it's the butterflies are a little bit smaller than some of the bigger patterns on this very large, lots of real estate shawl. So I then designed a different Monarch pattern, and that looks like this in the swatch. So the butterflies are designed closer to the shape rather than the stylized design of the actual butterflies. They're further apart, obviously, and but I did like the sort of inverted, how some of them were right side up and some were upside down, and so I intend to do that as well on the shawl. But this is what my Monarch shawl will be in the main body. So very similar to Christel Seyfarth's design, where there's a main background color and then the gradient, shifting gradient of the contrasting color, again in the Fair Isle design. For the border of the shawl, I first tried to make a milkweed design, which I think is very representative of milkweed. It looks nice, I think, against the side of the main body, but I wasn't completely happy with it for a couple of reasons. One, it's a bit narrow, and yes, I could put a couple of rows on either side. But two, the pink flowers are actually duplicate stitch, and that is a lot of work to go through and make these flowers after making the border around this mini feet around shawl. So I've put this aside and have been considering other border patterns. So let's now do some swatching for a different border option for this shawl. That's it for this video. Thank you for spending some of your creative time with me. I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!